Ever find yourself waiting endlessly at a big box pharmacy, feeling like just another number? At Tablet Pharmacy, they provide the personalized service you deserve. They offer free delivery and blister packaging options to make managing your medications easier than ever. Check their competitive prices online at TabletPharmacy.ca.
Welcome, friends. I am Cindy Thompson, and this is a Resilience Project. This is a space where stories are shared and possibilities are discovered. I invite you to partner with me in cultivating resilience among humans, one conversation at a time. I am particularly thrilled to be in conversation with Dr. Doug Walker today. I just find it so interesting to hear from someone who's been studying resilience, is immersed in the work of assisting communities following both man-made and natural disasters, and who is committed to developing programs for children's mental health. I think you will find that Dr. Walker has a way of packaging the information and sharing tools that are easy to use and bring value on an individual and community level. Dr. Walker is a clinical psychologist and the Chief Programs Director of Mercy Family Center, an outreach behavioral health ministry of Mercy Health, St. Louis. In response to Hurricane Katrina in September of 2005, Dr. Walker created Project Fleur-de-lis, New Orleans' largest school-based mental health program devoted to students struggling emotionally and academically in the years following the storm and destruction. Since the creation of Project Fleur-de-lis, his experience and expertise in assisting individuals and communities exposed to man-made and natural disasters has grown to include training and consultation in 25 countries. In 2016, Dr. Walker completed a Fulbright Specialist Scholarship in Fukushima City, Japan, where he conducted lectures in disaster mental health and collaborative research into peer-to-peer support post-2011 Tohoku earthquake, tsunami, and level 7 meltdown at the Fukushima Daiichi nuclear power plant. Dr. Walker lives in Mandeville, Louisiana, with his wife, Michelle, and his two sons, Jonathan and Ben, are currently attending university. So, Doug, I am so pleased to have you here today and respect that you'd take some time out to join me for a conversation. I am excited for people to learn from you, to hear of your expertise on resilience, and to share a little bit maybe about your personal story as well, about Hurricane Katrina and your experience of navigating that and surviving that.
Sure, absolutely. Yeah, it was now going on 15 years ago, and I was working, as I still am today, within a small outpatient clinic, Mercy, which is part of the larger Mercy health system. And as I said, I tell people I was minding my own business. Clinical psychologist, I was probably seeing 30, 35 people a week. And I remember that weekend before landfall, actually celebrating my brother's birthday down in the French Quarter. I had some other family in town, and a good friend of mine, a newscaster, halfway through the meal, got up with this look on his face and came to me, whispered in my ear, he said, "I need to go." And I didn't see him again for 3 months. And wow. That was a mark in time that I look back and had never predicted that life would change so much for us in the greater New Orleans area. And for me personally and professionally, I live north of New Orleans. I live about 35 miles, 40 miles north. And my own community was flooded, except it began at my house not flooding. So I missed being flooded by about an inch.
Wow.
2 boys at the time, 4 and 5 years old. My wife and boys, we all had evacuated, so we didn't get the brunt of the storm. But in turning back to opportunity, having sent my family up to Vermont, where I'm originally from, I stepped out into an opportunity to build a trauma-informed system of care for the New Orleans area schools. And I took it upon myself to find best practice, in some ways looking at the clean slate, although with chaos and really a literally toxic post-Katrina environment, an opportunity to build something that would last forever beyond the traumas that came with Hurricane Katrina. And sadly now, 15 years later, as the program persists, sadly help in this case, school-age children and teachers navigate the everyday trauma that New Orleans has.
So even this many years later, there's still a need for this program and the way in which that continues to support them.
Absolutely, yeah. So if your listeners are interested, it's called Project Fleur-de-lis. It means flower of light. And we started it about a month after landfall. And it continues to provide some direct care to kids in schools. But we found that it was better to consult and train others to do the work, because that's where the expertise is in schools, is with the teachers, with the counselors, and to build capacity. And so we've trained literally thousands of teachers and counselors in best practices, not only in evidence-based or evidence-informed trauma treatments, but we also, for good or for worse, sad, have gotten into the business of suicide prevention as well in youth.
So can we back up a little bit to what would you have seen and what were people experiencing, just to help our listeners understand what people might be going through after a trauma like that? Because I understand myself that there's that first wave of, I just can't believe this has just happened, and people are trying to piece their lives together. And there's that initial, have we survived it? But then what comes after that you would have seen that might help people understand some indicators of the trauma that people experienced?
Yeah. So in a lot of natural disasters, including this one, you're really disoriented because what was once there that you always knew was there was no more. And by that, I mean, buildings gone, institutions, people just leaving. So my kids had a hard time with classmates just not being there the next day, their family having to move. So I think there was a huge disoriented kind of experience, being disoriented for myself, and I think my coworkers as well. Finding ground, finding purpose saved me as well, because I had purpose. And I would imagine, Cindy, that the conversations that you've had with your other guests, that's probably a theme that rises as well, is finding a purpose, something. And I say this, it and still does. My work in working with traumatized individuals and communities, it's what keeps me up at night, but it's why I get up in the morning. And so I think that sense of purpose helped me professionally navigate that disaster, because our rebuilding took years. You could walk down my street now and I could show you 2 buildings that haven't been touched. They're still as they were the day that Katrina hit.
Yeah. Well, it's like having the rug pulled out from under you, and so much of life has changed suddenly. And it's such a loss in so many ways. Like you said, in relationships, people, even though they're okay and they've just left, you didn't get to say goodbye. It's just such a sudden and traumatic experience. It sounds like from that program that gave you a purpose. You started to develop ways that people could build their resilience and to educate others. What are some key components that maybe you could help us understand that you have been teaching others about resilience?
Yeah. First, let me say that the word resilience means a lot of things to a lot of different people. And I'm fearful, and your show, I think, is going to help support or re-establish a good definition for what resilience is. Words like sustainable, organic, they've been used so much that they have lost kind of their meaning. But, for me, resiliency is something that's reinforced. If you are able to put your feet on the floor each morning at some time of the day, I would consider you resilient. But, science says that the human brain after a disaster like that is extremely protective. It looks for continued threat, and that hypervigilance, something that I experienced working long hours, just driven, does flow into always looking at the world as hopeless and negative. There's a lot of good science that says that finding and choosing your attention is important, what to focus on. In focusing on not only what's good, but what you have control over is important. And there are some skills, some evidence-informed skills, some interventions, programs that I've trained worldwide to that end. So getting back, I think after disasters, individuals oftentimes just need reinforcing. One story that I have to tell was with the First Nation that I've worked with down here for quite a few years, the United Homa Nation. They're a group of wonderful individuals that primarily fishing. So that's oyster, that's crab, that's shrimp. And a lot of them switch their time seasonally to also work on the oil rigs in the Gulf of Mexico. But after our Deepwater Horizon oil spill, we had another, this time man-made disaster. I was invited down to the nation to present and maybe do some work with them. And I was humbled because I'm standing on stage looking out over the United Homa Council, about 100 members. And instantly I knew I had nothing to teach them. And I was humbled because there they are, over 300 years old. They go back far enough that they can't even record, where they kind of came from and began. But I said to them very humbly, I have nothing to teach you, but I have a lot to help reinforce.
Oh, I like that.
And so we actually we did some work together. We actually entered a handful of their schools. There were some middle schools that every child learned this one intervention, which I'll reference in a little bit. It was fun because the council members did it first, which is great. They have to test it first. So we did some adult groups as well. The intervention is called Skills for Psychological Recovery, and it's a product of, in the U.S., of the National Center for PTSD and the National Child Traumatic Stress Network. And I've been a master trainer for that intervention for over 10 years now. And it's my go-to under this umbrella of skills include 5 that they think actually reinforce. The evidence suggests that these 5 skills are important. So I did talk about looking at the positive, finding things that you can make changes in your life. But the 5 skills specifically include problem solving. So reinforcing an individual's problem solving skills, managing your reactions. So it's emotional reactions primarily. Social connectedness, and so being social, positive activities. And finally, and I think the most difficult is what we call helpful thinking. And it's not positive thinking, because the world, as we know, is not rainbows and unicorns. But the helpful thinking, for me, allows us to approach the possible. So let me give you an example.
Please.
We're faced with a lot of realities. Mine was looking at a neighborhood that was completely flooded, homes gone, friends leaving. And if I could go back in time and use this helpful thinking technique, one, what we call a hack, is change the language in which we use to accept what's before you, to plant your feet firmly on the ground, look and say, in my case, my community is destroyed. And then use what I would call a pivot word. It's usually however, or I think yet works the best. So my community is destroyed yet. And what comes after that is not only grateful, but it creates possibilities. And so as people listen to this podcast, I would highly recommend experimenting with that hack. Helpful thinking is difficult. It takes practice. But in my experience, even working internationally, all the languages that I've asked about have this kind of pivot word. It acknowledges first the reality, but it allows you quickly to pivot toward gratitude and possibility.
Yeah, I love that. And because each of those are within our control. Sometimes after a disaster, we are focusing on the things that we can't change or that have happened, what feel like they've happened to us or around us. Yet what you've suggested is, hey, these are some things that you can focus in on right now that might just help. I like the helpful. It's not positive necessarily, but just a shift.
Yeah. And, and to take that a step further is always evaluating whether your thoughts or your actions are helping or being harmful. Is this helpful to me to think this way or to act this way? as a psychologist, I engage in what we call cognitive behavioral therapy, looking how our thoughts impact our feelings and in turn how we behave or how our body feels. And it's a powerful tool to interrupt some of those negative cascades where we think poorly, we feel poorly, and then we act poorly. And oftentimes, with poor coping.
Yeah. So just by shifting that thinking pattern, even slightly, can have an impact on how people feel day to day, even amidst something really difficult.
In referring back to my personal experience, I didn't know this, but I had my own trauma narrative that I had built. As you know, trauma narratives are these stories that we work through on our own, either in a formal therapeutic relationship or with others in telling a story. Because the idea is that the more that we tell our stories, the less it has control over us, that it doesn't have the impact. We're not held hostage by it. In my trauma narrative was actually a slide deck. And I put together photos of New Orleans right after the storm, some that I had taken, some that were given to me by first responders, and it was set to music. And Cindy, for I would say 9 months, I could not watch that slide deck. I'd built it, but I couldn't watch it. And over time, I came to terms with being able to be exposed to it and work through it. It was one of my colleagues that pulled me aside once and said, "That's your trauma narrative. That's your story that you need to work through." So, that's something that we have to acknowledge too, is some people call that arriving at a sense of place, but there are narratives that, and some people, write them down, they draw, they do more of an oral history, but talking with others about, what's happened to us is important. I really, in inviting others to that journey is important.
I love that. So we're not just telling it in our head, but to be sharing that with someone else. Can I check in just to circle back for a moment? Is it possible that as you jumped in and started to help others and had a purpose in developing programs to make a difference in those around you, is it possible that your healing was delayed and it wasn't till maybe later when you saw that slide deck that you realized you had to put your own pieces on hold?
Likely so. And it's funny you say that because it's never been presented to me exactly that way. But if I look back at the frenetic nature of my life, it was as if, looking back, I was holding my breath to get all this done. It was certainly a distractor, but I think it also probably delayed my ability to heal on my own. And I think my message to caregivers out there, whether you're in mental health or medicine or taking care of anyone outside of yourself, is that yes, there is self-care that's necessary. How you arrive at that is going to be unique. I think you have to go with what you know. I think you have to be kind to yourself when you don't achieve it. So whether that's mindfulness or a morning walk or prayer or, whatever works for you in self-care, I think it's important to engage in. But I also don't think you need to beat yourself up if it doesn't happen. There's too many shoulds in the world, right? My message is to cut yourself some slack.
Absolutely. And to know that there will be a time and a place where it may become even more important to just step aside and take care of you. Because I'm imagining you were so busy and so immersed in that it wasn't until later that you realized you maybe could take care of yourself there and take little bits of time away just to recognize your need as well. And I think there's a lot of people out there who might be looking after their kids or looking after others around them, but to take that time for themselves also, like you're saying, because then it allows you to be sustainable in the work that you're doing in helping others.
Yes.
Yeah. So you've been developing these programs. You've been going around and speaking around the world. Would you like to share with us just some of the specific tools? And you're listing some great specific practices that people could incorporate into their lives. I think about your How's Your Five. Would you like to talk about that next?
Yeah, that's a neat story because it grew out of a lot of destruction and despair. And so as the story goes, we were always minding our own business, but bad things happen to good people. And it was on a Sunday in the spring of 2011 in Joplin, Missouri. So that's central part of the U.S. An EF5 tornado formed just the eastern edge of Oklahoma. And in that afternoon, in a matter of about 35 minutes, this EF5 tornado went through the center of town, killing about 163 people. Mm. Now, at the time, I had developed programs like Project Fleur-de-lis. I helped with the Deepwater Horizon oil spill. And I was invited by Mercy Health, my company, to help them recover. And so I always believe the experts are always on the ground. I know what I know, but it means nothing until we understand what a person's experience is, the nature of the community. And that's why man-made and natural disasters are so unique. They each had their own signature. So we were working in the bank building. It was down the street from what was Mercy Hospital. Mercy's hospital was hit directly. Mm-hmm. And if you get on the internet and do a couple searches, you can see the skeleton of a hospital. Miraculously, no one died in that hospital that day.
Wow.
So down the street, relocated administration, we began to start focus groups, just asking about what are people experiencing, what's going on. At this time, it was the spring, so this is probably July or August. It's a hot summer. There are other storms coming through. And all along, people were talking about getting together in small groups. So we knew social connectivity was important. But a couple themes came about. One was people were focused on work. There was either too much work now, not enough work, or they're now traveling long distances to be employed. The second was relationships strained. So grief and loss in homes, grief and loss in life, mm-hmm. connectedness. This town was transformed in a matter of 45 minutes. And as if a bulldozer had gone through town and flattened it. Positive activities were no more. And much of the infrastructure that was once theirs to enjoy, be it parks or the bowling alleys or the VFW, the veterans kind of groups, were gone, just wiped clean. So positive activities were hard to find. Sleep was very difficult to find. People had difficulty sleeping, especially at night, because of the vigilance that came with that kind of traumatized brain. Listening for tornado sirens and listening for storms. So they were triggered. And finally, the last one, we called it consumption. People were eating too much as coping, not eating enough as coping, and using drugs and alcohol to cope, in this case, poorly. So along the way, these themes, and this was across Mercy coworkers, it was across business owners, it was ringing true. But I saw people talking about this. Are they talking? And they said, no, because everyone's fine. Mm. I said, what do you mean? We ask everybody, how you doing? And I'm fine. And maybe, and I think it's human nature is that someone always has it worse than us. I'm fine. I don't need this. Mm-hmm. I received hot meals from the Red Cross after Katrina, but some people pass over those things because they believe that someone needs it more than them. So we had challenges with work, with love, relationships, play, sleep, and eating consumption. And so I said, someone said, oh, let's do some evaluation. Let's do a survey. I'm like, no. I said, this is going on. But I don't know. People aren't talking about it. How do we break through this? How do we break through I'm fine? How do we break through I'm good? One of the coworkers who lived in Joplin said, why don't we call it How's Your Five? And on that day was born in Joplin, Missouri. And How's Your Five is a conversation. It's not a program. It allows us, gives us permission, guides us in breaking past I'm fine or I'm good around the topics that I think still ring true. Now, again, it's not pixie dust. It's not going to help everyone. But what it does, it capitalizes on social connectivity. The WHO, the World Health Organization, has this really neat hierarchy of care where down below it's self-care. The next level is community support. Then it gets into more services that I might provide around outpatient clinics up to, and hopefully reluctantly, hospitalization. That support is where this fits. I didn't intend it to drop in there. I found about this later, but There are very few programs, and this is not a program, it's a conversation that helps us connect with others. In a world of social media where we think we're so connected, we're not asking the right questions. So How's Your Five has been used since that time in lots of natural disasters, including up your neck of the woods. And so we've rolled out it in Calgary, up in Fort McMurray after the wildfires. Both the Catholic and public schools adopted it as a way for them to keep connected with each other. And so we have a Twitter presence. I write daily Twitters around the facts behind those things. So facts behind sleep, the goodness that comes with positive activities. And we at Mercy have rolled it out system-wide for the coronavirus and the COVID-19. Imagine, if you will, the challenges in managing 42 healthcare workers, many of which are on the front lines. How's Your Five has helped individuals connect with each other in very difficult times.
I just love the concept behind it because it takes it deeper. I think about not just only in the work that I do. Of course, we sit with people and we are very intentional in how are you really? We're not just asking it in a flippant way. But when you meet a friend or a family member, you might say, how are you? And some people might be relieved that they go, I'm good. And it's kind of like, oh, good. We don't have to go any deeper than that. But imagine if we could go deeper and more intentionally and help them all be heard, seen, and understood. So just to know that someone else is genuinely interested in us. But I get the impression this really is something we can use for ourselves. How am I doing in these 5 quadrants?
Yeah, in fact, what happens is we've talked to people, have used it, and, I've analyzed in 100 different ways. By asking the question, how's your 5, you're also doing a self-check immediately, because you can't ask the question without having an answer for yourself. So if I'm asking, how's your 5, there's, I'm going through those 5 fairly quickly. There might be some I don't want to touch. In our experience, if there's an icebreaker in there somewhere, that seems to be the easiest way to enter the water. And, this idea of love and relationships can be anything from boyfriend, girlfriend, to husband, wife, to family, to friends. I mean, love is defined in hundreds of ways. Work is also school. And so we know that there are a lot of challenges. My hope is that How's Your 5 finds its place where it's needed, where it's welcome, and continue to have it under-engineered. There's a tiny, tiny facilitator's manual. I do train on it, like I did up in Alberta, but I don't want it to be something that it's not, which is, as you pointed out, Cindy, it's personal, it's homegrown, it's connectedness. I think as the shadow of the coronavirus goes away, we'll be reconnecting with each other again. But will there be the gratitude? Will there be going deeper, as you said? Are we just going to say, hey, how are you? I haven't seen you in a while. How's it going? Good. And kind of move on. Or, how was it for you? Like, now that we're here together, shoulder to shoulder, face to face, how's your sleep now? Or how did you do then? What was your narrative through these times? Because, and you and I are connecting on Zoom right now, but when we get back in person, I want to be able to reconnect. And this might be a guide, again, not just this program, but this conversation that we're having, to remind people to go deeper.
Well, it's a way of really assessing, how am I doing? Which, if we look after ourselves, we're also going to be able to support others. So taking care of your own 5 and being mindful of how that's going and what you might need to remedy some of those areas, knowing that it's fluctuating. You hear people talk about, some days I'm doing okay, but other days I don't want to get out of my pajamas. So checking in and having a community of people that are also taking an interest in you. But also, I wonder about how we could encourage people to do this even more day to day. People are emailing and they're Zooming, they're having meetings. But what would that look like if we started the meeting with checking in with everybody? How is your 5? And really genuinely taking an interest in coworkers in that way. I wonder what that might bring.
Yeah, we actually do that at Mercy. We engage in prayer as part of our ministry, but then we do a check-in. Now, obviously, if there's 35 people on the call, right now, not possible, but the smaller huddles, we call them, we're able to check in and we ask that question, how's your 5? Or we'll ask in a slightly different way, like, how do you come today? And usually it's in our group, we know that we're really talking about those 5 or something else. And so it is a great way to look underneath the hood, to self-check, to check in with yourself, with others. What I like about it is that it came from nothing, literally nothing, created from individuals who'd seen a lot, had been through a lot. And so, yeah, how's your 5? It's work, love, play, sleep, and eat. The eat part's a little tricky, really talking about consumables,
Yes.
But anytime, whether you use how's your 5 or something else, I think it's important to do a self-check. And to your point, this idea of people being strong or resilient every day is a myth. We're human beings. On any given day, we can get the wind knocked out of us, but it's about getting back up. And getting back up means putting 2 feet on the floor and seeing what comes that day, and give life a chance. And checking in on those 5 things can certainly help. You might say, geez, my sleep's bad, but I've been keeping up, with my hobbies. Work's okay. I'm still in love with the people around me. So maybe it's sleep that I need to focus on more, these coming weeks.
And we don't have to tackle everything at once every day.
No.
Yeah.
No, I think this idea of keeping life in balance is also a myth. I think it sets us up for failure. And I do some exercises when I train looking at work-life balance and those types of things. But I much rather, and this is not my idea, but I'll share it with you.
Sure,
so
please.
This was secondhand. And it was presented to me that keeping balance like a gymnast or a tightrope walker, we know that it's a precarious kind of existence. It doesn't feel good in some ways. And the vigilance that it takes to hold that position it takes a lot of effort, right? So work and play, work and family. Could we instead think of an idea that focuses more around the concepts of music? Being from New Orleans, we love our jazz, we love our live musicians. And so it was presented to me, I think, by a musician who said, would you much rather have a 3/4 time day than a 2/4? So you musicians out there understand this, because a 3/4 waltz feels so much different than a march, right?
Yes.
So can we think of our lives now, and not in terms of being in balance, but what's the tempo? What's the tone? There's a lot of other, musical kinds of metaphors, if we want to call them, we could use. But I think, again, we cut ourselves some slack. Today's 4/4 time. It's just regular 1, 2, 3, 4. We're going through. Then we have the marches, right? We're moving fast. And then maybe this Friday afternoon that we're in right now is this nice 3/4 time waltz. So I've been, as a psychologist, sharing this idea, and as a person, engaging in it more, not to say I'm in balance. I always have to be in balance. I have to accept the time, the tempo that's given to me that day, or maybe the one that I create.
Yes.
I can go into another different 8 bars and create something, but again, give ourselves permission to live and not feel that we're compelled to find always balance, and somehow there's a scorecard and you're out of balance, but you have to be in balance. So yeah,
we can be so hard on ourselves, can't we?
Yes.
And I really appreciate that concept. I'm going to use that if I can, because I just love that.
It's not mine, so just pay it forward.
Okay, thank you. We'll just keep spreading the love there.
There you go.
What I really want to pull out of that also is about, it's not a scorecard, also around competition. And you brought that up a couple times. Like, people might say, well, I don't have it as bad as the other person. And I think about during the pandemic, we still feel the restrictions of that and the effects of it. But I don't have young children that I'm homeschooling right now. And so I feel like I can't complain, because those parents right now that are home and navigating work and young families and, the stress that brings, I feel like, okay, I really can't complain about the pandemic right now. And yet we all feel it in our own way. And so I really appreciate your bringing that forward around just appreciating where you are at and doing your own inventory and not even comparing to where somebody else might be in that experience.
Yeah, you can't. So I don't know how many metaphors I'm allowed per podcast, but I'm going to throw out another one.
As many as you want.
So in my trainings, I start with an image of a tilt-a-whirl. So I'm sure you have them up in your neck of the woods. So these are carnival rides that spin, but they're individual cars that spin and everyone spins together. And so I've used this metaphor for COVID-19 and the coronavirus because the coronavirus allows us to all be on the same ride together. But even being in the same car together, so me sitting next to you, Cindy, and then friends and family, however we can pack into this car, right? The history that we come with to that ride and our perspective in the seat that we're in is going to be different. And we have to appreciate that. And it changes all the time. So think about it spinning and spinning and spinning all together as a group and individually. So I look at that one as well, this idea of coronavirus existence as a tilt-a-whirl, and to have empathy and compassion for those sitting beside us because they have experienced it different than us. And there isn't a measurement because we're all on this ride together.
Yes. And it's not visual. It's an experience, just like the tilt-a-whirl.
Mm-hmm.
So we're on this experience together, but it's not a visual thing that we can measure. So we want to be careful to not read minds or make any assumptions about how hard it should be or shouldn't be for somebody.
Right.
So having that empathy and compassion for one another, I love that too.
Yeah. And not be judgy. That's a whole other episode.
That's another podcast.
not to judge others.
Yes. So we've covered quite a bit of ground today, and I feel like we could sit here for another hour and be still touching the tip of the iceberg of the knowledge you have. Is there anything else that you thought about today that you would have liked to share with our listeners?
Well, I think we all have to accept that suffering is a part of life, that bad things happen to everyone. And I think that we have to accept that our life can change in a moment. But I'm not saying that in a negative or under a cloud kind of way. I'm talking about gratitude for what everyone does have. And maybe it can be reinforced by, that helpful thinking exercise I referenced. But I think that we as humans have been around a long time and we still have a lot to learn about how our brains navigate traumatic events. I always say, and come back here maybe in 5 years, if I'm still talking about these same things in 5 years, then something's wrong because there's always something to learn. And I think, Cindy, that's why you started the series, is because there's so much to learn. And our knowledge base around the traumatized brain will continue to improve. I think the interventions that we mental health professionals use in the future have to evolve. But I am looking for, and I'm really excited about people taking control of their own agency around this and knowing, first of all, that they are resilient because they put their feet on the floor, but finding ways that are custom, individualized to them, that make sense, relying on others as well. But, my hope is that no one comes and sees me. I want to be out of business as a trauma psychologist. So I think those are my messages: to cut yourself some slack, help others, because as you pointed out, helping others is also going to help yourself.
Excellent. What a great way to summarize our time here together. And your messages have been really rich that I hope the listeners will be able to take a few of them that might fit for them right now at this moment, and to know that they might listen back on this another time and get something else from it again. Because you're right, we are always learning, and what got us here isn't always going to get us through this next challenge that we might be in, because we've never experienced a pandemic before. So giving ourselves grace that it's okay to be learning what we need to do during this time. Thank you so much for being here and spending this time with me today and sharing your expertise with our listeners.
Well, thanks for the invitation, and I enjoyed my time. Thank you for your gift.
Well, my pleasure. Thank you, Doug. I am wondering how many of you might be inclined to listen to this particular episode more than once. There are just so many really interesting threads to pull out of this conversation. Full disclosure, I love discovering new tools that are easy to remember and a quick reference to share. How's Your 5 covers off key areas such as work, play, love, sleep, and eating habits. As you check in with friends, family, or acquaintances in the near future, how this might change the depth of this conversation you have will be really interesting. As Dr. Walker suggested, it is also an opportunity to check in with yourself to see if there is one aspect of this list that needs your attention. Dr. Walker also suggested an additional conversation piece that asks, what was your narrative during these times? And perhaps that will be another conversation post-COVID or during the remainder of this pandemic. When the rug has been pulled out from under you and you have not experienced anything like this before, it's not unusual to feel a sense of loss, perhaps times of anxiety and depression. The theme in building resilience, however, is that community and connection seem to be a foundational component. Remember to remain mindful of the narrative in your head, being careful to focus on the thoughts that are within your control and are not necessarily just positive, but helpful. The metaphor of the Tilt-A-Whirl carnival ride also stood out for me, remembering that we are all on this journey together, but on any given day, we may be in a seat that is different from others. How could this perspective bring greater empathy and compassion for one another? If you are listening to this episode and have appreciated some of these tools, I encourage you to take a moment and write down which of these you want to experiment with in the next few weeks. If you'd like to email me and share how's your 5 has been going, I would love to hear from you. Thank you for listening to this episode of A Resilience Project. We would not be doing this podcast without you. If you or someone you know has an inspirational story or is helping to build resilience in their community, please email me at cindy@aresilienceproject.com. In fact, email me either way. I would love to hear from you. Also, check out my website, aresilienceproject.com, to meet the amazing people who have joined me on these podcasts. Last but not least, a big thank you to Doris Media House for their editing support. As you go about your week, I invite you to think about one way you can continue to grow your resilience muscle. What is one thing you can start doing today? See you next week.
Ever find yourself waiting endlessly at a big box pharmacy, feeling like just another number? At Tablet Pharmacy, they provide the personalized service you deserve. They offer free delivery and blister packaging options to make managing your medications easier than ever. Check their competitive prices online at TabletPharmacy.ca